Hello, welcome to the showcase on professional experience informing professional practice. My name is Jeanette. My tutors are Danielle and Elizabeth. The workshop is Wednesday from 8 till 11 a.m. The school I completed my professional experience shows an enrolment number of 129 students. The community is in a low socio-economic area with a 4th percentile 849 ICSEA ranking. They pride themselves in being multicultural, with the heritage of students covering approximately 30 different countries. A high proportion of these families, approximately 70 to 80%, are from English as a second language background. These broad language groups represent many more religious and cultural groups within each language cohort. Many of these families are refugee migrants from Africa and the Middle East. This school is proudly an Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander focused school. The cohort comprises 40% of the student body. Their motto, Seek to Learn, not only applies to academia, but also the need to seek to learn about others, their backgrounds, their cultures, and their place in the community. This is a positive behaviour for learning school, and consequently have developed an evidence-based whole school systems approach that addresses the diverse academic and social needs of every student to support them to be successful. This PBL program is team-driven, using a problem-solving approach that engages students, parents and all school staff. This school has some unique challenges, both socially and academically. The classroom I spent my time in was Composite Prep Grade 1, with 23 students enrolled. There were only 4 Grade 1 students in this room, all working towards the achievement standards. The age group in this class were 4 to 6 years. As this is a PBL school and has a large percentage of ESAL students, behavioural management took up a lot of the teaching time. Key learning intention. This model is built around a Year 1 maths experience. The Australian curriculum content descriptor is number and algebra, number and place value. Now, to develop confidence with number sequences 2 and from 100 by 1s from any starting point, skip count by 2s, 5s and 10s starting from 0. The learning intention today is to understand how to skip count by 2s. The diagnostic assessment instrument I used to understand the student's prior knowledge was providing each student with a sheet of paper with a table printed on it, named and numbered to 20. Over here on the right, for differentiation, you'll notice the large font used and the bingo markers. The reason for this was my supervising teacher communicated to me that these students struggle with reading and very rarely use a pen or pencil. As I was more interested in what they knew about skip counting by 2s, these were the tools they used. This is the response I got from a student. At the end of the lesson, I collected the students' samples when they had finished. I analysed the responses prior to the next lesson. I noted the misconceptions when skip counting by 2s up to 20. Now, this student demonstrated an understanding, or maybe he remembered the skip count by 2s up to 6. Verbal feedback was communicated individually before the next lesson. Now, the analysis, when I started, this was what I saw in the students' responses. The students were confident counting from 0 to 20. The gaps they have is understanding strategies to skip count by 2s. They know skip count starting from 0 to 6. After this, it is evident limited strategies or knowledge were being demonstrated or practiced. The learning experiences were during maths rotation each day. To warm up the students' thinking, we counted to and from 20 collaboratively using a number line. I found this strategy at the start of the lesson had a positive learning experience to build the students' confidence. After this experience, the strategy used was I do, we do, you do. I demonstrated placing the counters and pegs on the number line to skip count by 2s. We then placed pegs on the number lines together. I encouraged students to count the numbers aloud when positioning the pegs, using different sensory to help cement this learning. At the end of each lesson, the students were asked to use their finger to point as they counted together, using the number line. Scaffolding, collaboration and communication were practiced throughout these learning experiences. During each lesson, students were formally assessed and verbally communicated, giving feedback, working towards using a variety of strategies. Now, for the formative assessment strategy, I used a variety of manipulatives to gauge students' understanding of grouping and skip counting by twos. Each day, the students were asked questions and encouraged to talk through the process they were using to group and skip count. For example, I asked, can you show me how you point to the numbers on the number line and count by twos? Skip counting by twos, what comes after 16? What comes before 10? Verbal feedback and feed forward were communicated to each student individually. Gauging strategies being practiced during the lesson, encouraging communication from the students. I used this information to identify who needed additional support. As mentioned back in slide 5, when the diagnostic assessment was done, how the students find it challenging to use a pencil. You will see I've continued planning experiences using counters and small pegs to mark the number lines. This strategy has helped the students stay focused on their learning. I've referenced from a CARA and the Australian Government website, a teaching flexibility is encouraged to personalise children's learning and respond to their needs and interests. Also, you'll notice the students on the left are indicating they have completed their task. This is a behavioural strategy used as part of the positive behaviour for learning. Students place hands-on labs when they have finished the activity. Now here you'll see on the formative assessment how for differentiation, large font was used for the numbers in the table and a bingo marker was provided for the students to mark the numbers in sequence now from 0 to 30. This formative assessment is linked back to the first diagnostic assessment. The format is the same. The results were reviewed and the students revised it further, so they used the feedback to feed forward. I collected the students' samples when completed. Now, when I was reviewing the students' results with the formative assessment, communicating verbal feedback, which included what they needed to continue working on, allowed me to challenge them to try and use pens and pencils to communicate and document their understanding. I introduced whiteboards and markers and large visual cards on the floor, which allowed the students to move and engage in different learning styles. And this created less behavioural issues and provided them with new strategies to explore. Grouping Unifix cubes by twos, using colours and transferring this information onto paper and whiteboards. Having limited access to technology meant I needed to engage the children using other tools. Now you'll see here Siegler's model of strategy choice uses an evolutionary metaphor, natural selection, to help with the understanding of cognitive change. Siegler found for basic maths facts, children try many different strategies and overlap them. When children learn new effective strategies, they will often stop using old techniques that they think are less successful. It is vitally important when teaching skip counting to give students the opportunity to explore different ways of learning. Concrete materials and pictorial representation are effective strategies to use in the primary years when teaching mathematics. I use scaffolding and close supervision, different strategies and manipulatives to gauge students' understanding of the key concepts. You'll see here on the right, one of my students received a school assembly award for this achievement in skip count by twos. This was a very proud moment for us both. He was delighted. Now you'll see on the final formative assessment as a final activity, I asked these Year 1 students to complete this maze, skip count by twos. You'll notice the numbers are smaller and they were given the choice of using a bingo marker or pencil to complete this task. Once the activity was completed, I asked the students to check each other's work with close supervision and guidance. We worked through the results together. By doing this, encouraged the students to collaborate and verbalise the strategies they were using during this task. Giving verbal feedback and feed forward on the results allowed the students to reflect on the task and the product. According to Hattie, it also acknowledges personal growth and allows students to consider their self-regulation, learning and engagement processes. I then collected the samples from the students when completed. The assessment process was very similar to this model. The diagnostic assessment was used to gauge the students' prior knowledge and skills, strengths and weaknesses relative to the learning intention. The difference between the unit's content and what was used on PECS was differentiating to include all students' diversity. Being a low socioeconomic area with a 4th percentile of 849 ICSEA ranking, and having a high proportion of these families from English as second language background made it very challenging. By focusing on continued formative assessment, learning experiences, feedback and feed forward was valuable. Being able to gauge their learning and strategies being used and then enacting on those results. Remembering these students are working towards their ACARA content descriptors. Now you'll see the evidence of impact. This is the student I used earlier in the diagnostic assessment, and this was their response. What we can see on the right-hand side is their final piece. So you can see the obvious growth in the students' learning and understanding of using strategies to skip count by twos, from the misconceptions in the diagnostic compared to the final formative. Thank you for your time.